Welcome to the Kelly Healing Project, where we have real conversations about healing, growth, and stepping into your power. I am Kelly, and I'm so glad you're here. So today, I'm joined by Laura Jean Day, founder of Neurogenic Qigong and author of the 13 Sacred Nights Oracle. Laura has spent more than 3 decades helping people reconnect with their bodies, regulate their nervous systems, and align with the natural rhythms of nature. So, in this conversation, we're going to explore the power of ritual, the deeper meaning behind holidays and seasonal transitions, how our body responds to stress and change, and why reconnecting with nature's rhythm can be such a profound part of the healing journey. Laura also shares her personal experience navigating illness and how that path ultimately shaped the work she does today. So, whether you're feeling overwhelmed, stuck in old patterns, or simply longing for a more intentional way of living, this conversation offers both practical wisdom and a fresh perspective on healing, growth, and transformation. So, please help me welcome Laura Day. So, thank you so much.
Hi, Kelly.
Really
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
So, can you tell us a little bit about your healing journey and what led you to the work that you do today?
Yeah. There are really two things that I'm putting out in the world at the moment, which are can stand alone and are also connected in certain ways. And that is the neurogenic Qigong, which you spoke of. And for those listening who are unfamiliar with Qigong, Qigong is um, it's an ancient Chinese form of energy cultivation. So qi meaning universal life force energy and
Mhm.
gong meaning the good work or practice of. So we have qi gong, the good work or practice of cultivating universal life force energy. And within qigong, there are two separate branches. You have the personal practices, which look like most folks are familiar with Tai Chi, which is a form of Qigong that is a martial art in nature. But if you think of, people doing these very deliberate, slow movements, moving through space, that would be the personal practices of Qigong. And the practices that I teach and practice are more general for, increasing your health and wellness, whether that's physical, emotional, or spiritual. And then there's also the clinical side of things, which looks more like a client lying on a massage table and the practitioner working with the meridian lines, the point systems along the meridian lines, the, five elements of classical acupuncture, wood, fire, earth, metal, water, the organ systems, that sort of thing. So that is qigong, and then the work that I do, which I have named neurogenic qigong, is a mashup of traditional clinical qigong or medical qigong and a modality that I studied in the Bay Area called TRE or tension and trauma releasing exercises. And essentially, what I do is help a client find a neurogenic tremor in the body. And neurogenic tremors are, if you think of the way a gazelle would shake or tremble, let's say after getting chased by a lion and finally recognizing that it's safe, that it's not going to be breakfast, lunch, or dinner, it will wander off to the side of the herd and then shake and tremor. What's happening is that the tension or the trapped tension from the overstimulating event is actually being released. So the nervous system is unwinding and letting go of that tension. And so it turns out that we're also mammals, believe it or not, and we have the same mechanism in our nervous systems. But we are socially conditioned to shut it down. So if you were in a public place, Kelly, and you started trembling, the rest of the human herd would probably not just, let you move through that that tremor and just acknowledge, oh, that's she's having a release, great, no problem. You'd probably get a bunch of people rushing over asking if you needed help, if you wanted to call an ambulance, do you have a medication that you need to take, whatever it is, but how do we help you make this stop? So we just have this socially conditioned idea that it's a problem. It's not. It's a really natural, wonderful thing for your nervous system to reset. So again, I've sort of mashed up that neurogenic tremor and then the clinical qigong and it's those are modalities that helped me really move the needle on my own healing journey, which began to answer your other question.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about your journey. I had already been teaching yoga for numerous years when I became a mom, but 3 months after I had my daughter, I tripped into chronic illness and was unable to figure out how to feel better. And so I ended up seeing my teacher as a client, and I was so tangibly and drastically shifted by her treatment. She hadn't even touched me. It was a energetic treatment. And I walked out of there feeling like I had been breathing underwater for years and was unaware. And suddenly it was like my head was above water. I had more space in my lungs. I felt taller. Like I actually had like a different bird's eye
Mhm.
view of things that I had, places that were familiar suddenly felt like I had a different perspective. It was just this massive shift. And so I instantly that day signed up for her 4 year program. And, that was the beginning of my healing journey. I sometimes tell that story and then people want to hear all about my miraculous healing, how I healed in one day, but it was the beginning. It was the beginning of a long
It's
journey. And, and there were so many things that I explored. And when you're up against a wall like that, when you're not feeling well, you will dive deeper down the rabbit hole than you would if there was no pressure. So, in retrospect, of course, I see the jewels in the journey, and it's of course so much a big part of my story and why I know the things I know and why I've explored the things I've explored and why I practice and teach Qigong and why I ended up writing my book, which is the other offering that I have at the moment. But I think I'll pause because that was a lot of information, and then we can talk about the book in a minute.
That's perfectly fine. I was taking some notes too on what you said, but also because you said tremors as well. And I've noticed with my journey and the more I guess I've given my body permission to not freeze up or not just be how it's supposed to be. I've noticed even in social situations that sometimes I have a little bit of a shake, especially if it's something new and it's nothing that's too noticeable. So you were talking about, okay, so basically how this works is it helps release some of that pent up energy. So when we shake, we have that tremor. It's not a bad thing. It's just energy that needs to be released, right? Correct?
Precisely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, okay. Also, you talked about meridian lines. So
Mhm.
for people listening who haven't really heard a lot about that, is it possible you could just like explain it just a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So, if you're familiar with acupuncture, if you go get an acupuncture treatment, they are placing those needles in what are called meridian lines or the points along the meridian lines. And the idea within Chinese medicine is that we have these flows, these rivers of energy that run through the body, and that they're in the same place in all of us, and they're very identifiable. And so, before they started putting needles in the meridians, they were just using their hands and their minds to move energy. So, um, yeah, that's kind of the idea. And then, when we have stagnation or blockages within
Mhm.
those flows of energy, that's where we experience, disease or dis-ease. Yeah,
Right, because our body is not at ease. Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah,
I've noticed in my own healing journey, I used to get sick a lot, especially when my nervous system was all over the place. And now I rarely get sick.
yeah.
I can remember the last time I got sick, it was probably almost 2 years ago. And
Wow.
is that the case for you? Like, do you rarely get sick?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't get sick that often. I'm not like superhuman.
Right.
Things come up all the time, or not all the time, but occasionally. And I just have so many more tools in my toolkit now and a much different relationship with my body. I would say the other modality that I incorporate into my private practice and that also has really been just really game changing for me and shifted the whole paradigm and the way that I conversate with my body
Mm.
would be German new medicine. So that's something to look into if that's a new modality for you that you
Okay.
haven't heard of. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's
I,
a beautiful
it,
system. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on German new medicine, but I'm
ooh,
not a
okay.
German new medicine expert, so I'll leave that to somebody else.
Okay.
But if folks listening are curious, I know Alex Zeck has some longer podcasts on German new medicine, but
Mhm.
it's essentially it's the work of a man named Dr. Hammer, and he over his lifetime was really able to identify how symptoms playing out in our bodies are actually brilliant biological programs that our
Mhm.
body has turned on in response to some conflict or challenge in our environment, some perceived conflict. And he did, I don't know, some 50,000 brain scans throughout his lifetime. And I mean, he really, he gathered a massive database of information, and with incredible accuracy was able to identify based on what symptoms were emerging, where in the brain the original impact was located from the traumatic or
Mhm.
conflicting event, and then also what sort of event or theme that would be related to in that person's life. And like I said, just a lifetime of
Oh,
study and data. And for me personally, it has been just in my own experiment, in my own life, in my own body, and then those around me watching their lives play out. It's been the most accurate system and most
oh,
empowering,
wow.
because you're no
Oh,
longer afraid of your symptom as if there's some external attack happening or something that's out of your control, or even the idea of like autoimmunity, that your body is attacking itself wrongly, like something's wrong here.
mhm.
It's really a very shifted, the whole paradigm shifts in that you're recognizing, no, my body is actually brilliant. It's doing
Right.
something perfect that is in perfect response to this threat or this conflict in my life. And really, the work to do is to
Mhm.
resolve that threat or conflict, and then just support your body through the transition that it needs to go to in order to get back to equilibrium.
Right.
So, yeah.
So basically, it's like your body is talking to you, but it's like,
Yeah,
are
yes,
you listening? That's
yes,
the thing.
100%. Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I feel like there, especially this day and age, there's so many people that are so disconnected from their body. It's
right.
just, and they don't know how to regulate their nervous system, and it's not talked about enough. It really is not.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our approaches to health and wellness, whether it's allopathic medicine or more alternative methods, it's still really often this focus that is, how do we turn this communication off? Right? So the body is
Mm,
communicating, and just how do we make that stop?
right.
Instead of going a layer deeper and asking, why is the body communicating in this fashion in the first place, and what's here that needs to be seen or addressed or shifted, in my life. So anyway, yeah,
So,
German new medicine.
right. So, how does a neurogenic Qigong support nervous system regulation different than traditional exercise or meditation? What have you noticed?
Oh gosh, well, all those things are wonderful. There's different
Right.
ways to release pent-up energy in the nervous system, and I wouldn't say that there's one way that's wrong or better. Um, it's just for me, the that process of allowing the body to tremor in that way got at some things that just sitting in meditation, which I do every day. I think it's a beautiful thing, and there's so many benefits, including the helping the nervous system settle, but also just I think it's it's probably the most effective way that we have to just begin to get familiar with our internal world,
Mm.
get to know ourselves, right? Which is so important in this human journey. But the tremoring specifically, I just had some things that I had a shoulder issue that miraculously disappeared, that I had been dealing with for years, like 7 years or something like that, that completely just dissolved with
Mhm.
the tremor work. It's an opportunity for emotions to surface that have maybe been trapped for a lifetime at least, or maybe lifetimes, depending on your view of reality.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's just another way in, and for me it was incredibly powerful. So like I said, the what I offer now through my private practice or in workshops are the things that tended to really move the needle for me, and then bringing that all together, and
Oh,
some kind of special alchemy, and that's what I now offer out in the world. So yeah.
wow. Wow. So you said you suffered with shoulder pain for years, and then miraculously, like with this doing that, then it healed. So you said it was instant, right?
Yeah,
It
so
was,
so what happens with the tremors is I like to think of, like, I sometimes use this analogy, like a tangled ball of yarn, right? Like my daughter used to come to me when she was like 5 years old and learning to knit, and she'd bring me these balls of yarn that she had gotten all tangled up, and she'd been trying to untangle for some time, without my help, and she was like yanking on this part or that part or the end of the string, right? And of course, what happens when you yank on
right.
it just gets tighter and more knotted up. And so I
Mhm.
sometimes will think of that as an analogy to when we approach our physical symptoms from an intellectual level, and we're trying so hard, and I tried for so many years to figure out intellectually what was wrong with me, and so many modalities, and so many practitioners. I explored so much, every self-help book on the market, and all the different diets, and all the different, oh gosh, I don't want to think about how many tens of thousands of dollars I spent on supplements, and all the
Wow.
things. And so I think sometimes when we approach it intellectually like that, it's almost like we end up making it worse. I used to think of, do you remember Briar Rabbit, that cartoon? You might be a little, that might be
I
a
don't think
little,
so, no.
you might be a little young for that. But there was a cartoon where this rascally rabbit he would get into all kinds of trouble, and there was a tar baby I forget who would set out this tar baby to try to trap him, and it was just like a in the shape of a baby, but it was made of tar, and it had like a, fake hat and jacket on. And he'd go to like punch it and kick it and end up getting all entangled in the tar baby. And again, that's how I used
Mhm.
to feel trying to like intellectually come at my problems and issues for the years that I wasn't feeling well. And so, what I love about the tremor process is it's completely body led. And so, you lie down on a yoga mat. You're not thinking, okay, I have this pain in my shoulder blade back here, so I'm going to move my shoulder, right? We're not choreographing from the level of the mind. And so, you really just allow I always use that word allow a lot with my clients and in my practice. You're allowing the body to unwind the trapped tension. And the body knows,
Mhm.
as the subconscious mind, the body knows how that tension went in, right? The pattern. So maybe it's going to start, tremoring in the inner thighs, and we're not even going to get to the shoulder until the third session or the fourth session or the fifth or whatever it is, because there's all this other stuff that's backed up and in the way that needs to unravel first.
Mhm.
And so it's a process where we can just let everything go and allow the wisdom of the release to just come through the body however it needs to. So
Oh.
so yeah, so I did that shoulder plane. Definitely, it was in one particular session where my shoulder started moving around. I was not doing it, I was allowing it. And there was all kinds of cracking noises happening. And then after that session, the shoulder pain in about a week slowly dissipated and was gone after years. And I've had all kinds of clients that have had similar experiences and or
Mhm.
memories surface. Most often, I would say they're memories that aren't completely obscured. They're not like recovered memories that they didn't know were there, but things that maybe you haven't thought about in a really long time. And you'll have a memory that might bubble to the surface, and then a flush of tremor or movement that
Wow.
that comes through the body in a wave, and it's like, oh wow, I forgot about that, and then this ripple of energy moves through. And then I've also had clients who've uncovered, memories that were really buried and inaccessible. So, yeah,
Hmm. So basically, yeah, memories that they pushed down.
right.
And then I guess their body felt safe enough or it was able to process those memories. So they
Yeah.
came to the surface.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Wow, that makes sense. That's so interesting. Okay. So but also you've spoken about the importance of seasonal rhythms. So what do you really mean by that? Can you go into more detail?
Yeah. So that paying more attention to the seasonal rhythms and the way that we lean into that rhythm, honor, celebrate that rhythm. That really came from a practice that actually the same teacher taught me the first year that I was in her program. So I learned this practice the year that my daughter was born, and it's called the 13 Sacred Nights. It is a practice that teaches us to lean into the quiet, the darkness, the profound stillness of midwinter or the winter solstice season, the peak of winter, the peak of darkness, when we typically in the Northern Hemisphere are out shopping compulsively, overindulging in sugar and alcohol, jam packing our December calendars. It is
Yeah.
the busiest time of year for most folks. We have all these social obligations. We are flooding our lawns with LED light displays. It's just like a slap in the face to the darkness, kind of like, no, we will not be quiet. We will not go inward. We will not face the darkness. So every kind of distraction you can think of. And the true magic of midwinter is the darkness. It's the infinite. If you think of
Mm.
lighting a match in broad daylight, it's kind of underwhelming, right? But if you light a match in the darkness, it's really clear where the light is. And it's similar in that season of winter. We're wrapped in this cloak of darkness, right? And it's cozy and it's quiet. There's the daylight hours are short. We have all this time to be calm and quiet and introspective, if we didn't have false indoor lighting. So, so we're just so cut off from these natural rhythms. We don't even pay attention to them. And in fact, in the season of winter, it's particularly ironic because we're pretty much culturally doing the exact opposite of what is true to the energies of the winter solstice season. So the 13 Sacred Nights is about again leaning into that quiet and darkness. It's about introspection. It is a time to plant our dream seeds in the fertile soil of the darkness, or what I call the womb of winter. So as above, so below, as without, so within. The light is returning on the horizon, externally in the environment, in nature. It's also happening internally in the internal world of the human psyche. So the inspiration for the new cycle of seasons is born in the womb of winter. And so it's a time for us to get very conscious about our intentions for the coming year. And this practice, beyond sort of like writing down your list of New Year's resolutions, it's a 13-day practice in being present, receiving guidance from whoever or however you name that something greater, whether it's God, source, spirit, Christ. This is a non-denominational practice. So whoever that is for you, you're tuning into that conversation, that relationship, receiving guidance. And then you're also, like I said, bringing in the things that you're wanting for the new season. So if you want to meditate more, you make sure you do it during those 13 days. If you want a certain person in your life, you make sure you do it during those 13 days, or you reach out to them in some way, shape, or form. If you want to cook more, garden more, exercise more, whatever it is, you're doing those things during this 13-day window. And it has this really sweet structure where each day corresponds to a month in the coming year. So you are creating a roadmap, an actual blueprint for the new cycle of seasons, winter, spring, summer, fall. And again, we're planting our dream seeds so they'll sprout in the spring, right? It's if you begin to pay attention to these rhythms, you'll notice that okay, the things that I was thinking about that I wanted to bring into this new year, okay, they're starting to push through the soil of the void, the infinite, into the realm of the manifest this spring. I'm taking baby steps, initial steps towards getting these balls rolling. In the summertime, we're fully expanded. We're in bloom. We're living the dream that we planted back in the darkness. And then in the fall, you're harvesting the fruits of your labor, thinking about what you want to, throw in the compost pile, what you want to keep for the next cycle before diving back in and beginning all over again. So this practice, although it is primarily a winter practice, it really begins to wake you up to these seasonal rhythms that, if we can begin to ride the wave as opposed to just completely, being oblivious of the world of nature that we are immersed in and a part of, and that is all around us. It's incredibly empowering and powerful, and it's actually amplifying the co-creative cycle by aligning consciously with these rhythms of nature.
Wow, that was great.
Yeah.
Because winter is my least favorite. It's my least favorite season because it is dark and it can be a little depressing, but that's such a beautiful way to look at it, that it's planting, you said planting the dream seeds for the new.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, there are a lot of people, who have seasonal, what is it, seasonal affective
Seasonal depression.
disorder.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and winter can be a hard time, especially I
Mm.
now am living in California, but when I learned this practice, I was living in Colorado, and I was born and raised in California, and I was living in the
Oh,
Rocky Mountains, like way, up in the mountains, and so it was a long, cold winter, and especially in the springtime, it was like I'd be way ready for summer,
gosh.
like overdue. My friends in
Right.
California are at the beach and the kale in their gardens is like already up to their ears and I'm still buried in snow in Colorado. So this practice, it really, it did bring a sweetness and a magic to the winter season that for me was quite a relief, being a
Mm.
California girl transplanted to the Rocky Mountains. So it's beautiful in that way. It also, I learned it the year my daughter was born, and
Mm.
I was really wanting to bring more ritual and more meaning to our holidays, which have become so hyper commercialized. We're really just
Yeah. Mm.
we're sleepwalking through this revolving door of shopping, sugar, and alcohol. With each season, it's like it starts with the winter holidays, whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah. They've all become commercialized,
Mm.
and then we just go from one to the next to the next to the next to the next, and you can see the branding change in the grocery store. Every
Right.
month or couple of months. What holiday based on what candies and what colors are you know on
Hmm.
display everywhere. And ritual is so important, and that's what our holidays are, right? They're just mass rituals that we're acting out, together in cahoots, all of us. And they are incredibly powerful, I believe, for two reasons. One, uh, if you believe that human consciousness, that our thoughts are divinely co-creative, which I do believe. I believe that our thoughts are on some level, and I don't know the exact formula. I don't pretend to know exactly how it works, but we're all, I believe, learning this right now, that this in some way, shape, or form plays a part in
Hmm.
creating this out here, this three-dimensional playing field. If you believe that, then ritual, we're all turning our consciousness, our attention in the same direction, focusing in a similar way, thinking similar thoughts, behaving in similar patterns. That is incredibly powerful. And those in positions of power, or those seeking more power, have known this for a very long time and have used our holidays and our rituals to shape and mold the behavior of the masses by rebranding time and time again the way that we celebrate. And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that this is the way we demonstrate to our children what is most important, what is sacred to our society. So, think about it. Okay, kids, you're out of school. Mom and dad have work off. This is clearly important. Everybody that we know is doing the same thing. This is what is most important about being human. We're teaching our kids what we hold sacred, what is most dear. So, what are we teaching them right now? Commercialism, materialism, again, shopping, sugar, and alcohol. So I have spent the last couple of years really researching the history of our holidays and uncovering that it really hasn't been a trickle down organic process of, old world
Mm.
rituals just slowly, maybe hitching a ride on the Mayflower and making their way to the New World, and then, organically, popping up here. It was a much more intentional and controlled, multi-layered journey that landed us where we are now with our current holiday traditions. And so once we expose that and recognize that history, we become perhaps a lot less defensive of our traditions because a lot of people get really knee-jerk defensive of like, well, don't take my Santa Claus away, like don't take my Easter Bunny away, whatever it is. But
Right.
if we know a little bit more about where they came from and wow, these things were actually spoon-fed to us in order to shift our behavior in the first place, then we might be a little more willing to pause. This is my hope that we can all
Mm.
individually and collectively pause and really think about what is most sacred to us, what is important, what do we want to teach our children, what is the effect of the traditions that we're currently, acting out, and then imagine again individually and
Mm.
collectively more meaningful ways to celebrate these sacred turning points in the year. So the 13 Sacred Nights is a great place to start. And I created a book and an oracle deck that teach that practice. That's the title. You can look it up, 13 Sacred Nights Oracle, Lara J. Day. You could also just find it under my name. But that's a beautiful place to start. And then I'm playing with writing a second book now about the sort of like the cliff notes on each holiday, the history of each holiday, and then and some thoughts on how we might bring some meaning back.
Is it possible that you could go into maybe a little more detail about the history of one of the holidays that we celebrate, or maybe even just give a fact that maybe a lot of people don't know about a famous
Yeah.
holiday?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
Christmas was the one that I started with, so we can go there.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So Christmas in the colonies looked nothing like what we think of as Christmas today. And in fact, Christmas was outlawed in Massachusetts from 1659 to 1681. So it was not what we're calling Christmas now, because why on earth would they outlaw,
Mm.
staying home and drinking hot apple cider and,
Yeah.
having a nice Christmas dinner and, giving presents to your children. So what Christmas actually looked like in the early days of the colonies was a lot more like Saturnalia, which was the ancient Roman midwinter festival. And that was more carnival-esque. So it was a time of complete societal upheaval and upside downness. So you had slaves being served by slave owners, children ruling the household, a fool was crowned king, there was cross-dressing, there was promiscuity, there was gambling, there was debauchery. It was just like this society-wide uh, release valve, like letting a little steam out of the kettle. And those traditions were sort of still happening in the colonies alongside the Puritans, who were just not having
Mm.
it. And then also the upper classes in the colonies started to pull away from these traditions. So one of the traditions of that time was called wassailing, where, bands of probably drunken youth, usually heavier on the side of the young boys, would go door to door. Working class, right? So poor working class youths would go door to door to wealthy manors, and they would sing songs called wassailing, right? Here we go, a wassailing. Or they would engage in mumming, which was putting on plays. And they would expect to be given either alcohol or sweets or even money in return. And what happened again in the early days of the colonies is that the upper classes started closing the doors, pulling away from these traditions and saying, no, we don't want to participate. We're not going to give you any alcohol. We're not going to, whatever it is. And then that very quickly escalated into violence and vandalism. And so things were really getting out of hand. And so a very small group of elite New Yorkers got together and they quite literally rebranded Christmas. So
Hmm.
they intentionally came up with a much more domesticated holiday. So there would be no more parading around in the streets at midnight. There would be no more going door to door, wassailing and mumming. It would all be contained within the walls of the parlor. They sort of romanticized the idea of the Christmas tree. They came up with, they said the house of ale will not be vanquished by the house of God. So we're going to create a new deity, and they called him Santa Claus. And The Night Before
Mm.
Christmas was a poem by Clement Clarke Moore, and that was in 1823, and that was sort of the first introduction of this new deity of Santa Claus that they introduced. And so it was a very intentional process, again, by this small group of New York elites that they cherry picked old world traditions because they wanted the masses to feel romantically plugged into their past. But again, they wanted to domesticate the holiday, tone down the behavior, and bring it within the walls of the parlor. So there would be no more exchange between the upper class and the lower classes. Everybody would stay in their in their box. So again, most people, I certainly had this idea that all of our Christmas traditions just sort of organically, slowly over time trickled
Mm.
down from different cultures from the old world, from Europe, typically, and that's just really not how it went down. So, that this was fascinating and shocking to me as I researched where all of our Christmas traditions came from, and then again, there's
Mm.
lots of they did cherry pick traditions, so there are notes of Saint Nicholas, and the Dutch saint, and there are notes of the reindeer from the Siberian culture that people always very often reference, and so you'll find those familiar pieces or storylines, but they were sort of brought together again by this group of intellectuals, and then yeah, hand fed to us.
Wow, that's
There's a book called The Battle for Christmas that was one of the 32 books that I read that does a really great job of depicting that history.
wow, that's really interesting. I never would have
Yeah,
thought that. Oh my gosh.
yeah, yeah. Stephen Nissenbaum is the author of that book. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so how can we start to create holidays and traditions that actually nourish us instead of deplete us? Because I mean,
Yeah.
Christmas is exhausting.
It's
Just
exhausting.
yeah.
And I do want to throw out the disclaimer as well. This isn't about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. If you have traditions that do nourish you, or you
Mhm.
love, whatever the things are that you love, my daughter loves the Christmas tree. We have a giant baby blue fake Christmas tree that, I call it Cookie Monster. And we have this beautiful ornament collection. A lot of them are passed down from my grandmother, and she loves to get them out every year. And she's so precise about how she hangs them on the Christmas tree. And, so if you have tradition that you love and it does nourish you, by all means continue, but give yourself permission to let go of the things that feel stressful, that don't feel in alignment, that are depleting, right? And so for me, that was the dreaded yearly chore of putting up the lights, the Christmas lights outside, on the roof and I hated that every year. It was I just resented it, and like getting out there with the ladder and my arms aching and the tangles of balls of lights. And so I finally gave myself permission, largely because of the sacred nights, to let that go. Like, oh, I don't have to do this, and we can be the only house on our block that doesn't have Christmas lights, and that's just fine,
Right.
And so as the season approaches now, it's sort of like those other traditions have kind of faded into the background. And my daughter and I get excited about the opportunity to reset, the opportunity to remember our future, to dream our future forward, the opportunity to soak in that
Mhm.
blanket of darkness that's so cozy. We do candlelight for the 13 sacred nights. We don't turn on any artificial lighting. As best we can. We get excited to go pick out pretty journals every year. We go to the bookstore and there's that wall of beautiful journals, and we pick out a special journal for our 13 Sacred Nights practice every year. But to get back to your question, I think for me, the easiest way to think about how to bring in more meaning that feels healthier, feels more aligned for me, is to just simply pay attention to what is nature doing. So, again, in the wintertime, the trees have dropped their leaves. Plants and grasses have often receded back into the earth. The animals are hibernating, quieting down, everything sort of drawing energy inward. So it's a time to draw inward, right? In the spring, again, our seedlings of inspiration are sprouting. You might get out in the garden and plant some things, or just notice what's budding in your environment, externally and internally. What little inspirations are popping up through the soil of your inner world. In the summertime, it's a time to be outside in the sunshine. We have these long, beautiful days, maybe bonfires, certainly getting out in nature, being more active, any ritual or activity, hiking with friends, camping, any of that kind of thing. In the fall, I think it's a very natural time for the human psyche to begin to think about the full cycle of life. Themes of death, ancestors. If you look at what nature's doing all around you, everything is in decay, right? It's returning back to where it came from. And so, for instance, Halloween. First of all, again, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I love Halloween. I love the creativity, that
Mm,
aspect of it. My daughter is a crazy musician, and for the last, I don't know, 8 years or so, we have put so much time and energy into her costume. She dresses up like a different musical rock star every year and then actually learns one of their pieces, and it's so much fun. And there are so many people who look forward to, like, who's Jocelyn going to be for Halloween this year and what song is she going to do. So we have so much fun with the creative piece, but we also create an altar, and we put pictures up of all of our loved ones who've passed on. And it's this beautiful
mm,
opportunity. We put like favorite things, like I'll put a grapefruit out for my grandma and a ginger candy out for the other grandma, and my a harmonica for my grandpa, and just different items that are meaningful, to those people in our lives who've passed on. And then, of course, inevitably, we also end up talking about them. And I
mm,
ended up over the years telling my daughter stories about her ancestors that may or may not have ever come up. And so, it's a rich way to just remember our loved ones, but then also we're talking about death in a way that's not scary and not taboo. And I think, with so many of our holidays, it becomes this distortion of. So we have Halloween where you have all these hellish, satanic images and imagery, and that's so unhealthy. And that's just furthering, I think, our fear and this,
mm.
of death, right? And the sort of unhealthy relationship that we have with death. And so those are just some quick thoughts. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Um, so have you seen any remarkable transformations in people who consistently practice the sacred nights tradition?
Yeah.
Like,
I
okay.
mean, I laugh because I mean, just almost at least every week, I consistently get letters and, emails
Mm,
or notes on Instagram, on social media, from people who, um, either have specific synchronicities that are just blowing their
mm,
mind to tell me about the way that, the oracle card from my oracle deck that they drew for the sixth sacred night that corresponds to, that would be the fifth month of the year, May, that corresponds to May, the way that, the synchronicity lined up, that was just laugh out loud, goosebump inducing. They can't believe it, and that process of noticing the synchronicities that tumble out of our journals, it begins to really build and concretize our faith in the unseen world of energy and, source or God or spirit. And it's such an important process. Year after year, returning to this practice, you really, you deepen that relationship, that co-creative relationship, that conversation that we are having with God at all times, whether we recognize it or not. For me personally, I would say that the 13 sacred nights, more than any other practice, I've got over 3 decades of teaching and seeking and and healing and all of the things and working with clients. And honestly, more than any other practice, the 13 Sacred Nights has dramatically shifted the way that I move through my life, period. The way that I conversate with the divine, the relationship that I have with
Mhm.
the divine and with, therefore, my own consciousness and the events of my life and the way that this crazy experience is all playing out. Um, it's profound. It's this sweet, magical holiday practice, and it is unspeakably profound the way that it brings magic into your life, into your awareness, really. The magic is there,
Mhm.
but helps us wake up to it. It's just, yeah, it's really beautiful. Yeah.
So you've talked about journals. So like each night, do you kind of you take your journal out and do you kind of journal how you want that month to
Yeah. So
go? Is
so
that how?
yeah, so it's a 13-day practice. And again, each day, each of those 13 days corresponds to a month in the coming year. And then the first day is a reflection or a foreshadowing of the entire year to come. So, what you're really doing in creating that journal is two things. The first thing is you're receiving. So, you're receiving that guidance. And that looks like just journaling everything that's happening during those 13 days. There's no specific time that you need to journal. It doesn't need to be at night. It's just within each 24-hour window that again corresponds to a month in the coming year. So you're journaling everything that happens externally in your world, all your day-to-day activities, and then also internally what you're feeling and thinking. And then you're journaling your oracle card draws that you're drawing an oracle card for each of the 13 nights. So for those of you who don't know, I have the deck right here. If you don't know what an oracle deck is, this is the Sacred Nights Oracle, and you have so with any oracle deck, you always have a guidebook and then the cards themselves. So these are the backs of the
Oh,
cards.
beautiful.
And then, the each card has a different image.
Oh,
And so you would draw a card and, without looking, you spread them out with the back up. And there's multiple ways to choose a card, and I give directions in the guidebook. But you would draw a card and then go look up in the guidebook the matching little bit of guidance, and it gives you a theme, something to work on, and then in my guidebook there's also a ritual practice or a meditation that is a suggestion as well. So you're drawing the oracle cards, you're journaling everything that happens. And then the second piece, like I had talked about, is the things that you are wanting. You're also giving your desires to this
mm.
stream of energy that's moving through in a way where it just gets swept right into your future like it's moving on a riptide. It's so magical. And so you're recording all of this in your journal. And then as you move through your year, I mean, just the 13 days and the journaling in and of itself is a beautiful practice, right? Because to be that hyper aware, it's like a boot camp in mindfulness because you're laying down the roadmap, the imprint, the blueprint for the coming cycle. So you're much more motivated just to be present, right? And so you have this boot camp in mindfulness for 13 days and this journal practice and the oracle deck. And then and you want to make sure you bring the things in that make you happy, right? Like my daughter and I create a happy feel good 13 Sacred Nights song list every year. And then we dance by candlelight, in the kitchen and the living room, and we turn those tunes on for the whole 13 Sacred Nights that just lift our spirits. And so make it your own, make it playful. But then throughout the remainder of the year, as you're moving through your year, you're checking back in with your journal at the beginning of each month. Okay, what card did I draw? What's the theme for this month? What's my guide? And inevitably the cards that you drew end up lining up with your life in a way, again, that you're just like looking up at the sky going, are you kidding me? Like it's so perfect, and just serves to shift your perspective in a way that helps you move through some challenge with a little more grace, hopefully a little more intelligence, a little more
Right.
pause, whatever it is. So, and then, it's also, it's really sewing the thread of the sacred throughout your entire year because you're constantly reminded through these synchronicities there's some greater magic and meaning going on here. I am clearly not
Yes.
alone. There is
Hmm.
some kind of design to this chaos, this seeming, seemingly um, whatever, meaningless chaos. And again, it just really over time begins to strengthen your relationship with the unseen and your faith that there's something bigger going on here. Yeah.
Right. Those cards were beautiful too. They were, and those were some big cards too. Those were gorgeous. Yeah, that's
Yeah, I worked
awesome.
on the artwork. I
Yes,
can give
yeah.
most of the credit to my dear friend Jenny Brennan, who was
Oh,
my artist. It was really she collaborated with me in creating the artwork. It was mostly
awesome.
her, but I get really persnickety about where things are like in space. So I'd be like, "Can you move this a little bit that way and add a little dash of sprinkle
Right.
or glitter?" Or, we worked on it together, but it was mostly her. She was just a
Oh,
really beautiful creative friend of mine.
my
Yeah.
gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So if our listeners could walk away with one message about reconnecting to themselves, their bodies, and the rhythm of life, what would you want it to be?
Pay attention to nature. I mean, she is the portal to the divine that I think is most accessible and most powerful for us. Just, and it doesn't have to be hard or complicated. I think so often we
Mhm.
feel like if it's going to be effective, it has to be really esoteric and complex. And, we got to read all these books and take all these workshops and, pay lots of money for whatever it is. And really, you could just go walk out your front door barefoot, get the light of the sunrise in your eyes and on your skin, eat seasonally, go outside for sunset, go to the beach or a river or a lake and sit with the
Mm.
living water. Um, these are simple things that we all have access to.
Right. Yes. It's so easy to just take it for granted or just, go through life and just feel disconnected, disconnected from yourself, disconnected from your body, and disconnected from nature. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so where can listeners find you and connect with your work?
Yeah, so my website is the easiest place to find me. It's got all my links. It's Lara, Lara, don't sneak a U in there. Laraj, and my middle initial, and then Day, DAY, larajday.com. There's links for the Oracle deck there. The Oracle deck is also, you can just find it by the title 13 Sacred Nights Oracle. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, my publisher's website, beyondword.com, Simon and Schuster, all the places. Um, and then I also offer seasonal Qigong courses that bring together Qigong practice and this idea of seasonal living and how to pay more attention to the true energies of each season and the gifts of each season. And then I also offer. I've just shifted away. My private practice for individual sessions is full at the moment, but I am offering a limited number of spots for a yearly mentorship program for those who want to go deeper one-on-one with me.
Wow.
So,
Oh,
yeah.
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your time and really all the insight and everything that you shared just about the history of the holidays and Qigong. It's really been incredible. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome,
Yeah.
Kelly.
All right. So thank you so much for listening to the Kelly Healing Project. Remember, healing is not about becoming somebody new. It's about reconnecting with who you truly are. So healing the past and empowering your future. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.